And good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Paul. How are you?
Hey, Monday, my favorite day.
Favorite day of the week. That's awesome.
I'm turning over a new leaf. I love Mondays. I love it.
Since when?
I just can't wait to get away from the house on the weekend.
On a
Too much
Monday.
weekend time, man.
Yeah.
I need to come in here so I can be away on a Monday. Get up early. Who needs sleep?
Yeah. Anyway, we're waiting for our guest. Guest's not here, so I guess we'll wait.
Oh well.
um,
Well, kind of a cloudy day.
cloudy
Kind of
day.
rain last night, surprised me, which I didn't think it was going to rain. I guess we live in the tropics or the rainforest. Yeah.
Obviously, it's knocked out internet.
Huh?
Obviously, it's knocked out internet or something.
Yeah, something's going on. I don't know what.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I have no idea. So anyway,
Yeah.
this weekend, right? So I figured, all right, well, I got a lot of things to do. One thing I want to do is I want to get the lawn mowed.
Yeah.
So I figured, all right. So the lawnmower that we have is old. First of all, I've gotten it fixed like every year for the last 3 years. It's $60 a pop.
Yeah.
And plus, I bought it, off the guy that we bought the house from for 125. So 180, 125. So, and then there was another one actually in between. So close to $400 to have this thing fixed, right?
Yeah.
So I decide, all right, I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna get a new mower, or whatever.
Okay.
So I went ahead and I tried to start this one again. Figured, all right, give it one more shot. Didn't start. Now I just had it fixed 2 months ago.
Wow.
Tuned up and ready to go. So I looked in and was like, all right, maybe there's not a lot of gas in there. So there's not. So I figured, all right. I look at my bucket. I ain't got no gas in that either.
Oh,
so now I got to go up
Jesus.
to the store.
Get
So
gas.
I did. So I went up and I put gas into the tank. Started. Stop. And then it just wouldn't start anymore.
Oh boy.
And I'm like, okay, I got weeds growing and just a whole bunch of crap in my car and my lawn, and it's like whatever. So I walked in the house. Now Melissa, last time, because we were at Home Depot a few months ago, and I wanted to buy a new mower. She wouldn't let me. So I went in there just Saturday, and I looked at her and I said, "This one's not starting again. We've paid a lot of money to have it fixed. Give me 2 good reasons why we don't go and buy a new one right now." And she just looked at me like,
Oh boy.
okay. And so we went over and got a new lawnmower, got a new electric lawnmower. It was on sale from $750 to $499.
That's good.
Yeah, it was cool. So then I got it home. Melissa and I put it together, and we're ready to go. Trying to figure out. Then we can't figure out how to get the blade moving, but we were operator's error. We didn't. It was something we had to hit.
Yeah.
So we did.
Did you cut the grass?
Well, I did, and I moved it 5 feet, and battery dead.
So you didn't charge the battery?
Well, I thought they would have some sort of nominal
Well,
charge or whatever.
usually
right?
they come in. Some of them are really charged.
So it takes 2 batteries, right?
216.
But they give you 4,
They give you 4,
right?
2 to charge and 2 to
Right. So I said, all right. So I took the other 2, same thing. So yesterday, after we got done doing youth football in Colchester, I figured, all right, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mow the lawn.
Yeah.
It lasts like 30 minutes
That's it.
before it dies.
Really?
Yes.
They were fully charged.
Yeah. Yes.
Wow. Holy cow.
I'm like, I don't know if I like this.
That's not much.
No. And I have I have like a postage stamp,
I mean, yeah.
front yard and a little bit of a backyard, and it's not.
Wow.
Yeah.
I would
30
think
minutes.
they would last a hell of a lot longer than 30 minutes.
I would think 45 minutes to an hour. That's what it said.
That's what I would think.
Barely.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I would.
It's got all these cool features. It's self-propelled. It's all this blah
Oh,
blah
yeah,
blah.
yeah.
But no. Anyway, so that was my fun this morning with that.
Wow.
So good morning, Victoria. Thanks for coming on in. And Scott, hello. We have a guest this morning who has not arrived yet. So we're just kind of burning time till he gets there. Scott says, I'd be happy to last 30 to 45 minutes. Check your battery, Scott.
Well, it's the way of the future.
What?
Batteries.
Batteries? I know.
Yeah, that's the way of the future. So
I know. So I don't know. So it was pretty discouraging. Oh, hi. Come on, we've already trashed you. No, right over here. Right over here.
Yeah,
I was in the right building.
Yeah. How you doing, Tom?
Good.
All right. So our guest has arrived. It's Tom Sinkowitz. Hey, Tom. What's going on? He is the first selectman candidate running against Kevin Cunningham in Plainfield. And we're going to get an idea of who he is and why and whoever. But we'll try that. Let's go ahead and get the camera adjusted for Tom. And there we go. All right. You're there. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. So
it's been a while since
the last building.
Yeah, the last building.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people are doing that. Like, where are you now? I don't even know half the time. Sometimes I float over there.
Yeah.
It's like, wait a minute, we're not here anymore. We don't even go here anymore.
Yeah.
So as far as the town of Plainfield is concerned, let's just jump right into it. From what I could see, and tell me if I'm wrong, it's like a few years ago, you just kind of popped out of nowhere and all of a sudden ended up on the Board of Finance.
Mm-hmm.
How did that come about?
So I've been a resident of the town for the past 15 years. I have a lot of family ties in Plainfield. Originally, my mother is from Plainfield. My grandmother still resides in Plainfield. So I always had ties to the town. And so after I grew up in Putnam, that's where originally born and raised, I decided I wanted to get out of town and find a different spot to kind of go settle down in. And I always tended to be drawn to Plainfield just because knowing it's my family heritage, family town. And I've always really loved it. Even when it was funny, when I lived in Putnam, I would always want to come to Plainfield.
Right.
And it's not like there was even, you go back 15, 20 years ago, it's not like there was a lot going on at that time, but it was just something about the town that always interests me. Definitely the historic aspect. That's why one of the first organizations I had ever joined was the Historical Society. I love the Plainfield Historical Society.
Can you pull the microphone just a little bit closer to you?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, the Historical Society. I work with Ruth Bergeron, who's the president of the Historical Society. She's great. And so that was my first involvement was with the Historical Society. And then after that, I explored other things of, I love this town so much, definitely was going to settle down in it. And then I wanted to figure out how could I give back to the town? Because I've always been kind of in that kind of mentality. Grew up in scouting. Actually, I'm an Eagle Scout from Putnam.
Very good.
So
very good.
That's kind of where I learned to, give back to the community and kind of understand how local government works.
Right.
A lot of it started.
So you didn't have any kind of local government experience really yet to this point.
Right. The Board of
Okay.
Finance was my first time as far as
Okay.
involvement, which I'm finishing 6 years on the Board of Finance. So
Now you how long were you on the Board of Finance before you became the chair?
So that was on day one.
That's what I thought. That's
Yeah.
what I thought.
Yeah, because last time I was with you, I was Board of Finance chair at that
Right.
time.
So how did that happen? I mean, day one, you get voted on the board, and all of a sudden, boom, you're chair. I mean, what is it about like your background that says, you need to be the Board of Finance chairman?
Yeah, I mean, I guess at that point the board had a lot of seasoned people on it. At that point, I was going to be the youngest person on it, and obviously one who had not been even on one meeting yet. I had sat in on a number of meetings, sat in the auditorium and watched the Board of Finance meetings. And this was before the days of the recording, June and Art Gagney.
Sure.
We appreciate
Plainfield Watchdog Media.
Yes, Plainfield Watchdog Media. Yep. So before the days of them recording and posting it, I did used to go and actually listen in of what's going on at these Board of Finance meetings, Board of Selectmen meetings. And that's where I kind of started to get my interest as far as, well, where are the tax dollars going and what are the decisions that the Board of Finance has to make? So that got me interested and maybe want to run. And then once I got elected onto the Board of Finance, then, my intent was, well, I want to obviously get at least a year behind my belt and understand how it works. And then leave the first meeting as chairman was definitely not on my
I remember that. I'm like, how does this happen?
Yeah.
Because
But
I didn't know you. I didn't,
Mhm.
you know, hadn't heard of you. I mean, what is your background? What is your you know, what is your work background?
so my work background is nonprofit management. So I worked for the Boy Scouts for many years, managing
Oh, okay.
their
Right, right.
finances and their business department. They actually have a headquarters up in East Hartford. So I worked in one of their jobs where I managed one of the properties, which is J.M. Webster Scott Reservation, having served as an administrator out there for many years, managing their budget. Not an easy task, even though it's, you know, it's nonprofit and it's the Boy
Yeah.
Scouts. You know, a lot of people think like, oh, there's probably not much to that, but it's just like any other like property management or, you know, managing of facilities. It's like there's a
Sure.
lot that goes into it. So that was initially my experience. I also was in retail management up in Putnam. Worked at Kmart, Sears,
Sure,
back
Yeah.
back in the day when those were still thriving.
There's more for your life, it seems.
you know,
That's
yeah.
what I hear. You know, blue
Yeah.
light special, blue light.
Oh yeah, but that was another thing where I, you know, at the time it was just getting me through college, high school, and college. You know, was the plan of working at Kmart and Sears. But before I had left there, I actually had been promoted to an assistant store manager. In charge of replenishing stock on the floor and customer service and that kind of thing. So that was kind of my first like leadership type experience in the
How
real
old
world.
were you then?
Back then, 18, 19.
Okay.
So
So you were young.
yeah, so that was my first leadership and management type experience. Then again, worked for the Boy Scouts for many years. And then for the past 10 years, I've been the property manager for Senate Imaging Systems, Connecticut Yankee Mill, which is a longtime local business in Plainfield. So that's where I manage their budget, their accounts, and deal with vendors, deal with a lot of maintenance projects as far as getting the contract signed for them and all that. So it's been an interesting run over there. But I also felt good of the fact that it wasn't only just experience and wasn't just a paycheck, but the fact that it's a small business for the community of Plainfield that I've really enjoyed working for, and certainly would continue to work for them too if other opportunities don't arise. So.
Sure. You have anything there, Paul?
Yeah, just I mean, what made you decide to run for selectman?
So selectman, and part of it was I had to decide what I wanted to do this year because 2023 is when my term was up on the Board of Finance. So that was part of it. Is I needed to decide, did I want to run for another 6 years on the Board of Finance, or did I want to go for a different position? And that's one of the great things about being in local government, any level of government, is that you're not bound to, of course, do multiple terms in one position. You can do that for a little while, get experience, and then go on to the next thing. And I felt very confident that being that I was chair for 4 years on the Board of Finance, I definitely got a lot of important experience, which I definitely didn't realize, how much went into, especially chairing the Board of Finance. And it probably
Trial by fire.
yeah,
kind of?
trial by fire. Yeah. And it is probably one of the most important boards along with Board of Education because of the amount of money that we're responsible for overseeing, questioning and making sure that everything is being held accountable, in different departments, and that we're doing everything we can to keep the town afloat, to keep them funded.
Sure.
So that experience is very important because if you come from, any type of background, but you don't know municipal financing and how that works, I can see that being first selectman would be tough because, you need to have an idea of how the Board of Education works. You need to understand how, the town government and how it's funded.
We know that here. The Board of Finance holds the pen.
Right.
They
Right.
definitely hold the pen.
Right.
But here's one thing that I always wanted to know about the Board of Finance.
Mm.
It's going to sound kind of a goofy question, but so you're managing all this money, and the Board of Finance is really kind of responsible for that.
Mhm.
Let's say there's no money; it's all gone. What happens? Do you guys just put the gates up and close Plainfield down? What happens?
No, we do have a what if scenario, and we have a fund balance, a general fund that money gets returned to, and what happens is we're always getting updates on what the fund balance is. And one of the questions that we'll bring up periodically to our finance director is, besides what are we at right now as far as the level, how far could we pay our bills, in the future if things were to just completely start to fold and shut down. Ideally, we should have at least like a month to 2 months in that reserve balance. But you got to understand that it fluctuates because when you got multiple projects going on and anything that's drawing from the fund balance, you may be able to have like 2 months, one day, and then like a month and a half, a couple months later.
Yeah, I
so
understand.
you got to keep an eye on it. But that's, what the purpose is there is it's really the what if scenario. The worst case scenario is you have the fund balance to resort to. But even so, I mean, it's not going to keep you going that long. And
Right.
so that's with, it was the failure of like state government to come through with a budget, which we've been down that road before. We've
Right.
seen when the state drags themselves. So can't get a decision made on their budget. And therefore the towns will suffer and have to figure out other means, which is easier said than done, because while you could get through a month or two from the fund balance, it's like, well, what the heck happens next? What happens 6 months, or something. So hopefully never have to deal with that situation.
Right.
you know.
I'd never, how does that happen? Does the state come in and take over at that point, or if
Mhm.
out of money?
If you were be the selectman, you're probably going to have arguments to the finance board, because they're going to want to do something. The finance board is going to say,
Mhm.
you ain't got enough money.
Yeah.
So now you're going to be on the other side of the aisle, not the one that you're used to. And, as a candidate, what do you want to bring to, what's your thoughts in the future of Plainfield?
I mean, the big thing is need to continue to bring business. Over the past couple of years, there's been small businesses that have come to town. I have been able to meet a lot of these business owners. I've been at a lot of the ribbon cutting ceremonies, and when I've asked them, as far as what brought you to Plainfield, a lot of times it's not one individual. Like, a lot of times, I try to tell people all the time, like, I'm not going to take credit for obviously other people's work, but it's like, I asked them, is it because somebody from the town reached out to you? And a lot of times it's not necessarily a town official, is the reason why they came to town. It could be the rate in which they're leasing out a building, or bought a building, the rate in which they're paying for it. This seemed to be the best offer in this town. Sometimes it's geographic location right next to 395, depending on what they're doing. But a lot of others just seem to like the geographic area of the town. They like meeting a lot of the citizens here, and they did some research as far as, well, what do you attract out here? And it's like, we get a lot of tourists who come through Plainfield. They may be heading to Putnam, or some other area, but Plainfield is definitely a great stop, for a number of different things besides gas, besides food. And a lot of times people will explore. And I've actually had these people stop at my place of business where they're clearly an out of towner, they're clearly not from around here. And so I'll wave them down, be like, hey, are you looking for something? Like, yeah, I'm trying to find, Lowe's, or I'm trying to find the town hall, or I'm trying to find whatever. So, I'm always giving them direction. But sometimes, as I found out, these were potential developers. These were possible business owners who were looking for a spot in town. So it's been interesting meeting a lot of these business owners and developers over the years, but that needs to continue. And it can't just be expected that, if we build it, they will automatically come to us, because that doesn't always happen, especially out here in the quiet corner. You can't just assume that they're just going to. So
where are they going to go? Belleville?
Right. They're going to go Belleville.
Twin cities of Attawacken and Belleville.
Right. Griswold.
Well, no, that's an option.
Yeah,
we have not had much fortune,
Mm-hmm.
I guess you could say, Paul, when it comes to economic development. So I guess the question I would have, and I think economic development is probably one of the biggest glaring eyesores in just, in any town, to try to make sure you have to build.
It is.
What do you do when you, let's say it just kind of flatlines for a while?
Mhm.
What does Tom Sinkowitz do as first selectman to try to revitalize that once again?
Well, for one thing, got to work with the department we have, which is our town planner, and we also have an economic development commission. And so we got to work with what we have, saying that, hey, the times are getting tough. We haven't seen much, let's say, of development for a while. Let's say we were in that situation. Automatically, I'm going to work with the town planner, work with the grant writer, and also work with the state Department of Economic Development and economic housing, to find out is housing, possibly a department area that we need to consider.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually has come up as far as one thought is we haven't had much activity going on at the Warrigan Mill. And this is something I'm very, it's very near and dear to me, is the historic buildings of our town, just like this town, there's a lot of old warehouses or mills, which are gone from yesteryear. Some are
downtown. Really.
Yeah.
There's this big, tall buildings down, tall 3-story buildings.
Right.
But yeah.
But some are burnt down, some are, partially demolished or whatever. But the Warrigan Mill, it just wasn't that many years ago. We had C&M Corporation that was in the Warrigan Mill. But unfortunately, since they left, there has been no business to go in there. And what I've found out in my research through the Historical Society is that a lot of those type of mills, the most thriving business you'll ever see in one of those old textile mills is housing, is loft housing, condos. And we do have a perfect example of it right here in Plainfield, because it's the Central Village, in Central Village, the condos over there in Central Village. Beautiful mill. And it's been preserved for many years now. It gets maintained, condos, filled in it. It's great. And so, that probably would be the best bet for the Wauregan mill. And so the key is you got to work with developers, because possibly the owner right now is just not going to look at hanging on to it. And actually that has been the case, as they've been trying to offload it, because it's also not an easy area to sell. It's Wauregan, Connecticut. It's not right next to 395. It's in the vicinity, but it's an old, quiet, mill village.
And the crime rate is not exactly low over there compared to the rest of the town. So I would think it's probably one of the higher crime rate areas in Plainfield.
Yeah.
So if I'm coming into town, I'm looking at a mill and I'm like, oh, wait, what are you going to tell me?
Right.
If there's a lot of there's a lot of drugs over there, and stuff. What are you going to tell me? To say, all right, you need to come in. You really should take a look at Wauregan Mills. What do you say?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say to it is that the building itself, I mean, the way those buildings were constructed and the long-term use of those buildings, like, it could be there forever if it gets used and maintained. And in some cases, it's not far gone. If we try to get it developed now, because
the longer it's an awful idea.
No. But part of it, like I said, is the building, because it can be a multi-use building. It can have store frontage in it, could have housing like in the upper levels in it. Yeah. And another good example is up in Putnam, the Cargill Loft Apartments. Has some small business in there and has residential, but at least it's still in use. The last thing we want to see, and Plainfield, of course, is a long history of this, is we have mill sites that have sat there for a long time and become dilapidated, and in the case of the Interroyal Mill, eventually burned to the ground. It's definitely not what we want to see with something like the Wauregan Mill. Right, we've had it here,
which is now Veterans Memorial Park.
Right. So, I mean, the building itself, I think, could be persuaded, to a developer. But yes, like you were saying, you got to keep into consideration the surrounding neighborhood areas, but also the fact that we have a police department, and I've met with our police department many times when it comes to the budget, as far as what their needs are, and the calls are pretty regular, in certain parts of town.
In Wauregan.
But Wauregan is part of it. Yeah. In other parts of town too. But at least we have a police department, because then I think about how there's many towns like us that have old mills, have neighborhoods that have, suspicious activity, but they have no police department. They rely on like resident state trooper, and their response time could be a while, depending on what's going on. So I consider ourselves fortunate that we have a police department, and hopefully, that adds some point of safety, to the fact that we have it, whereas many towns don't. And Jewett City used to have a police department back in the day. Yeah,
we did, which we now have resident troopers for Jewett City, where we have two.
Yeah,
we have one during the day and one at night. One first shift, one second shift, and we have road troopers for overnight. But I will tell you this: troopers are like ninjas, man. They are here.
Yeah.
And when something happens, Paul, haven't we seen all of a sudden, boom, there's four cars. And I don't know if I've seen that anywhere else, to be honest with you. We actually had a Sterling resident just pop in and just said, I wouldn't be using Cargill Mill as an example. And I don't know, because I'm not familiar. So why would she say something like that?
So it would be said because there's been a lot of controversy with that whole development of that mill. I mean, I'm glad to see that it's a mill that was repurposed, it was gutted, it's used, but the way in which they got there was very shady.
Was there
in
an
the
ownership swap back and forth, and all of a sudden somebody kind of turned up dead?
Somebody turned up dead, right?
Okay.
So there was that.
So
there was that suspicion in the beginning, but lately the biggest controversy has been they did not do a thorough enough cleaning of the inside of it. So there was actually traces of still, you got lead paint, years and years of lead paint that were on the beams. You got lead that can seep into brickwork there. And eventually they started getting traces. So they were doing it by like a case by case basis, meaning like you got this floor or this area of apartment. So they were abating it, doing additional cleaning of like the brickwork and the wood. But the reality is, like, you shouldn't be doing that once people have already moved into, the building. And in some cases, there was some children, you get children crawling around on the floor, and it's like, that was not going well at all for them. So clearly, if we were at the point where we were, getting the Wauregan mill developed, that's one of the biggest things. It's like, you got to make sure that this developer is understanding. And that's where I'm very knowledgeable about these textile mills, because my business that I've been working for, we're in the old Prevel Industries mill right next to the town hall. And so I have a lot of experience as far as knowing, how saturated are these old beams, and floorboards, and how does this brickwork deteriorate, and how, if you're going to develop it, you got to do it the right way, because you don't want this coming back to hurt any residents, coming back to affect anybody's health. So that is very controversial. But again, the idea, looking at it not in that respect of what happened, but the idea of that mill could just be rotting and could be collapsing within itself. And then I look at mills like in Dayville, there's one on 101 if you're heading towards Pomfret. It's like various parts of it are all demolished because it became a safety concern. But it's just kind of sitting there.
What about, let's centralize back in Plainfield though.
Yeah.
What about Command?
Yep, Command is another example of process that started with the developer, demolition, and also the gutting of some of the repurposed like beams, or granite stones, windows. That whole process started and then abruptly stopped. And then it goes to the legal battle, and that's where it's challenging. Part of what I would do as first selectman is, of course, still stay in touch and give periodic updates on what's going on with Command. Unfortunately, I've been doing that now as far as checking in to see has anything changed with the legal battle, in the court system. And unfortunately, it's just taken forever, being in the receivership that it is to get through that. But that definitely needs to be gotten through, because that's one of the top things that comes up all the time of people saying, like, what is being done about this? Like, it looks like a bomb went off, inside the Command complex there.
Huzik used to be a real thriving little community.
It did.
They still are to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
But, Command, if they did something with that, that would really, I think, would bring a lot back to the town. Paul, I know you're not just eye candy. Why don't you, I'm sure you have something to say.
Well, I was trying to say something, but you kept talking.
Oh, man, that's typical.
I guess my question would be, if I was a Plainfield voter, what would want to make me to vote for you versus the incumbent?
Mm-hmm.
What do you bring versus, Plainfield's been in pretty good shape.
Mm-hmm.
So not like here where we have some issues, but
we're waiting for the invasion.
Yeah.
What makes, does everybody know who you are?
Tom Sparkman's going to take us over.
What would make me want to vote for you versus,
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And that's the point that we're at right now. The campaign season it's getting out and talking to voters and obviously saying who you are. One of the biggest things that I have learned and become good at over the years and what I've done for a living is being fiscally conservative, and that I don't have a mentality of trying to be able to satisfy everything all at once, because there's just only so much money in the bank to be able to do this. So an example being like, you got to keep up with so many different things in town government. You got to keep up with salary. We got contractual, employees. We got union protected employees, which you got to honor that. You got to work with the unions. And everybody, in our town hall, and all of our town workers, our teachers, they all do excellent work for the town. And so they deserve to be rewarded. And so, we got to be able to keep up with that. On the flip side, though, we also have long-term maintenance projects, which have been put on the back burner for many years. And it happens every budget season is what it comes down to, is that every budget season we have to make cuts. And a lot of times the long-term maintenance projects is what ended up being on the cutting board. And the problem is then you have to go through another year of prolonging, some of these things, and they get progressively worse and they get more costly. Yep. Roads. But what I have a different, I think, perspective on, a different mentality, is that I don't think that we can do all of the projects that are going on simultaneously and still have plenty of money, down the road, assuming that things could fall through, meaning have enough money in the fund balance to be able to go to if there's an emergency situation, if there's the unexpected, because we can only budget for so much. We can only predict so much in the future of what we believe we're going to need money for. Then you're going to run into situations where something craps out. And we've had it in the history of our town. The dehumidifier system for our pool. We got the pool in the town hall. It crapped out. It was on its last leg. This was going back many years ago.
COVID,
and
wasn't it?
Before COVID.
COVID?
Yeah.
Right.
And so what happened is you can't just like say, we'll deal with that next year. It's like, because the all the condensation, everything's going to be, getting on the walls, the ceiling, and eventually everything's going to be
Mold.
falling apart, right? Mold. So that's an example of one of those things that we didn't know the exact date that it was going to crap out. It did. And we had to figure out, all right, so this is something that it's going to have to come from the fund balance because we didn't budget for it. So examples like that, though you can't predict that. You don't know when that kind of thing is going to happen. But there's other things, though, that we can budget for, and we can budget for early on, meaning like you don't want to put it on year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. We got to put it first and foremost because it's something that it probably should have been done even long before Kevin was in office. And that's the difference with different administrations, is that one administration might have cut something or might have just decided to put something on the back burner. And then upcoming administrations they didn't revisit it because they had other things in mind. Right. But the big thing is that, I do think that Plainfield will be successful in the future. And I think we can get new businesses in town, but I also don't get too overconfident because I've also seen, and I've had these type of business deals at my current job where they fall through. We have a contract that's signed and we think everything is on the up and up and we think we're good through a certain year. And then all of a sudden, now, you know what, we're going to veer off from the contract. We're going to terminate it early, even if there's penalties with it. And then it's like, well, what do we do now? Like, that was not in the forecast, that's not in the plans. And so I think what you have to be is you have to be very careful with the spending. Now, there's also grant money. Grant money is something that we have a grant writer who's brought in a whole bunch of money, which is awesome. But grants are also not what keeps the town running. Grants help a town, and a lot of times they're a one-time deal. They're not something that you're going to get year after year. But you also need to think on the long-term planning as far as, so you got a grant and it's going to fund, let's say, a majority of the project. The taxpayers are still going to have to pay a good portion of that project. It's going to come from
but I would think it would depend on the project too, where the taxpayer would say, well, all right, you know what? This is actually worth doing.
Mm-hmm.
The grant's going to pay, say, I don't know, 60% or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And the taxpayer, I'm just spitballing.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the taxpayers on the hook for 40%. Well, would that be up to them?
Mm-hmm.
Up to them, like, at a referendum, decide, well, whether or not we want to go ahead and do that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, the townspeople would definitely still have the say in it. But you also got to think of the long-term effects, meaning if you're getting things that are physical, physical objects that are being put like outside or something, what happens when, it gets vandalized? What happens when it just falls into disrepair? Because, again, going back to what I was just saying is we have buildings that have been in town for a long time that their maintenance got put on the back burner. And so it's like even smaller type structures, or physical things outside, they too could end up getting cut in future budgets. And so it's, the way I look at it in the big picture is that we have to preserve and we have to maintain what we have. And sometimes what happens is you're not going to be able to get everything done. You're going to have to make sacrifices. And sacrifices can sometimes mean, if you're weighing in on, we need to get a drainage system fixed because the drainage system is doing a number on one of our buildings, or we need to develop something in recreation or park, or something like that. It doesn't mean that we don't improve recreation and park. Of course, we need to improve that. We need to provide our children, our families, things to do. But when it comes to the priority, it's like you got to address the long-term maintenance that has been neglected, again, even long before maybe you were in office, before you can proceed with some of the other projects. Because the mentality of we're going to try to do the good projects, the long-term maintenance projects, keep up with the salary demands, and basically satisfy everything. It's just we only have so many tax dollars, and there's only so many grants out there. And so you really got to, be cautious with the amount of spending. And you also got to be in the mentality of like, where is Plainfield going to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And it doesn't matter who the elected official is. I always thought this on the Board of Finance, like I'm not going to be on the Board of Finance forever, but yet I still want to know, where are we as a town going to be based on our tax base,
That's
and
fair. Yeah. Absolutely.
And so that's
being fiscally responsible.
Yeah. And so that's basically a different approach. And that's something that I represent, is trying to be a bit more fiscally cautious, fiscally conservative. But again, it's the balance is certainly challenging. And that's part of the challenge of the job, which I think I can uphold to, which is, again, you don't want to put things completely in the dark. Like, you still got to fund the police department. You still, and in the case of the rec department, an example is when I was on the Board of Finance the first year or two, we were losing money. on the pool. And now we're actually, we're well on our way of being successful with the pool. We're making money. We have extra money. And so we're actually talking about, some of the improvements that have been made in the rec department and what would be done with that extra money, in the long term. So this is a good thing. And it's like certain things like that, obviously, I don't want to go backwards, in time. I certainly want that kind of stuff to continue. And so working with all of our departments, all of our department heads, our town employees is something that I definitely want to, do, because I think it's possible. But on the same point, while working to continue to improve them, we also got to make sure that there's caps and that we just can't budget for, pie in the sky every year. It's like we got to stay within our means and know that there's only so many tax dollars out there that, we have to spend.
Well, so you're talking about tax dollars. Paul, you're looking at me. Do you have something, Mr. Eye Candy?
I can understand. I can understand what you're saying with the budget. You're going to be on the opposite side now. You're not going to be part of the finance board. You're going to have to put up with people on the finance board that aren't going to agree what you want to do. You're completely opposite now.
Yeah.
So now you're going to fight for money just like everybody else. And we all know how finance boards are. People want to raise their taxes. They don't want to do this. You're going to want to do something. And you're going to say, oh, finance board ain't going to give it to me. So you're on a completely opposite side now, where you are now.
Yeah.
You're going to have control of the money anymore.
No. And there's also the Board of Ed. I'm talking about other
There you
boards.
go.
The Board of Ed is they have a lot of money in their budget. And the thing is a lot of the projects that I've thought about of what needs to be done is we have to stay on top of our school buildings. And we have a great example of a preserved historic building, which is the old Plainfield Grammar School. It's the one next to the old Better Value, now Dollar Tree. It's called.
I heard there's a 14th Dollar Tree coming in Plainfield.
I heard rumor about that as well. But we call it the ECC building, and that's where our Board of Ed, our administrators, superintendent are based. And but it's an example of a very old building, from the early 1900s that it's had its downfalls. It did fall into disrepair back in the 90s, but Paul Sweet, when he was in office, was able to get some grant money, and we were able to fix it back up. Thank goodness, because otherwise it would have turned out like our annex, our old high school. Yeah, it would have ended up just like that. So that's an example of a building that it's been kind of pulled from the disintegration, category is now back in active use, but we got to make sure we stay on topics. I don't want it, certainly going backwards. And it's probably one of the better buildings. But then when we look at some of the, we'll say, younger buildings that were built maybe, 20 years ago, or 30 years ago, whatever, some of them have some long-term issues that sooner or later we're going to have to act on. And so, to your point too, is that not only having to work with the Board of Finance, but the Board of Ed as well, is I don't want to just, leave it where, it's, it's the Board of Ed's problem. They're just going to have to figure it out, and, they're on their own. It's like, I believe that there's going to have to be more town involvement, working with the Board of Ed to make them understand that they're town buildings. At the end of the day, the Board of Ed uses them, they budget them, they maintain them, but they are town buildings. And so we got to think of the long-term plans with them.
Who's your running mate? I'm sure you must have a running mate.
Yep, Peggy Borey. So she is the manager of the Cumberland Farms in Musso. She's also very active in the community, very active with the Rams football field programs, long-term Lions Club member, Plainfield Lions Club. And so very active with the community, long-time resident. And I met Peggy about like 7 years ago and got to know her. And she's just great. I mean, we're definitely one of the most dedicated volunteers I know in the town. And that's kind of where I think her and I really connected, is that it's great to connect with so many people, regardless of political affiliation, who are just, they love this town. They love this town. They don't want to leave. They want to continue to figure out, how can I do more? How can I continue to volunteer? And in the case of this, I mean, the Board of Selectmen does have a stipend. And obviously the first selectman is a full-time job, but it's beyond it. To me, it's well beyond the paycheck. It's not about the paycheck. For me personally, I'm doing fine, where I am now, but it's really about I want to continue to help this town out. And I do through a lot of different volunteer organizations. Peggy's the same way. So we really have that common ground of we love this town. We plan on being here for a long time, not going anywhere. And regardless of the results of the election, I mean, we'll continue to do what we do, which is just work with people in the community, support those in need. And it's a great feeling. It's one of those things that, again, for me, it goes back to my involvement in scouting is helping others, and kind of the way to bring happiness to yourself is by bringing happiness to others. And we really have done that. I mean, I see with some of the programs and some of the events that Peggy and I have volunteered with and help, it's like a lot of happy families, a lot of happy kids. And that's what we want to continue to do. It's just doing it from a different side of you're doing it on the government side. It's not always easy because it goes back to, we were saying before with like the budget. It's like people a lot of times are not happy. They're not happy with the budget, not happy with the Board of Finance. And so it's hard sometimes bringing happiness from a government perspective, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. There's a lot of events and a lot of ceremonies and a lot of opportunities for you to continue to give back, even if you're doing it pretty much full time.
So, and I knew this, it was bound to come up, with somebody in the chat room, and I'm just going to read it out to you, because one thing that we try to pride ourselves on here is we try to be right down the middle. We're not. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and play favoritism to any side. You know what I mean? Which I haven't. But here's a question that I knew was, especially you knew that this was going to have to come up, and I'm sure this has come up to you in the past, especially when you decided to run. I'm just going to read it verbatim. The town is finally thriving under the Cunningham administration. Town of Plainfield knows this. Why change? Why Tom Sinkowitz now when the town of Plainfield seems to be moving in the right direction? And that's basically this question.
Well, I think what it really comes down to is that there's a lot that a lot of residents don't see on the government side that we as the Board of Finance, we try to bring to light as much as possible during the budget season. Is when we're getting the presentations done to the Board of Finance, we're trying to show them that there is a lot of good going on in this community. No doubt about it.
Yeah, you're not making fun or slamming Cunningham. I noticed that. So.
Yeah, but here's the thing: is just because the town is doing well, and is going in a good direction, it's not all necessarily just Kevin's, credit. Some of it can go back to Paul Sweet's days, one of the longest serving first selectmen in the town's history. Kathy Tendrich, who was before Kevin. Some of these things of why we're at, the point we're at, that doesn't just go within the past 2 years or the past 4 years. Some
Taverna, let's just keep going.
That's going back. But the point is that there are things on the government side that the public does not see, which are not going so well. And it's not the kind of stuff that obviously we're going to promote. We're not going to go around promoting that we have building issues, that we have drainage issues, that we have a handicap ramp issue, even though that one's a pretty obvious one because so many people go to the town hall and see it. But, the point is that these are things that, have not been going well, have been getting progressively worse. And, we may be starting to put some attention to it now, but some of these things should have had attention drawn to them like 3 or 4 years ago. And so I think what it really comes down to is priorities as far as what are we focusing on and what do we need to do to not let things continue to snowball and get worse. So again, a lot of it boils down to maintenance, maintenance, buildings, infrastructure, which is not what you call an attractive promote. Like you're not going to see that. Recently, there was a marketing postcard that went out to all the residents in there. I don't know if you saw a copy of it. It's great, very well put together postcard, which had information about like the eateries, the attractions in Plainfield. Great. But, so something like that is showing all the positive points, all the high points. Of course, it's not going to tell you, but we also have this list of issues that we have to address. These are a lot of things are underground issues or up on the roof issues or those kind of things, which some of them need to be the top priority over other, again, like good projects like, oh, this would be nice to have, or feel good projects, because the longer we let some of these things go, the worse they're going to get and the more expensive they're going to get. And the annex can be used as an example of that. The annex was something that had to be done because of how bad it got. It's not what I would call a great accomplishment. Kevin did what he had to do because, again, it was a liability and safety concern for the town. But it's important for people to, of course, go back in the history of like, like, well, how did we get to this point with getting the annex so bad that it had to come down this year? And a lot of it goes back to issues with our local government making poor decisions and not being on top of maintenance, not being on top of marketing, repurposing of the property. And this is what happens when you let a building go. So look at the annex and see.
You need to be here an hour.
Come over here, Barbara. Come over here, Barbara. Sorry, Tom.
That's all right.
This is Mrs. McFeely. No, this is
I know.
Barbara the mail lady. I have a.
Nice to meet you.
I gotta. How long before you come back?
It'll be within the hour.
All right.
An
Well,
hour, okay?
we're going to talk to Tom for another 2 hours or 3 hours or so because he's got all the time in the world today. No, thanks, Barbara.
Take care.
Barbara the mail lady, everybody.
Yeah.
Yes, Barbara. Yes. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
but
no, it's all right.
it's pretty funny because I saw her downtown about a month ago.
Uh-huh.
We see her a lot anyway, but she goes, ever since I've been on your show, every time I go to a door, they go, you're on that show all the time, aren't you? And she's on the show for like 30 seconds. I just think it's funny.
Yeah.
So anyway, go ahead, continue.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, that's all right.
Tom.
So that's really what it comes down to is that there's a lot of things that a lot of residents don't realize what's going on. It's great when we can see all the great things that are happening in town, but there's still many other things that need to be, addressed. And again, these are things that, we're not going to get a gold star for it. We're not going to get an award for it, but it's just one of those things that the taxpayers have an expectation. They have an expectation of, well, we have a lot of good things going on in town with rec, with parks, and with other improvements like that. A lot of them expect that, but of course you're on top of, sewage and water. You're on top of roads. You're on top of electrical issues, drainage, roof work, and that kind of thing. A lot of them assume that, you must be, because things are going so well. You must be, all up to snuff, the reality is we're not. And of course, we're not the only town in that position. Every town, when it comes to having to make budget cuts, having to make sacrifices, a lot of times the long-term maintenance and upkeep is what'll go on the back burner. But it's one of my focuses, one of my priorities, which is, again, not going to be attractive to the average family. I mean, what good is a kid, going to see out of doing roof work or drainage work on a town building? They're not going to, they're not going to see any long-term benefit to it.
Right.
But the reality is, this is the roof or the drainage that's actually over the kid's head in a school system, or when it comes to like HVAC heating, that's another thing that has been in the discussion. It's not like it's been, completely ignored, but it's a huge undertaking because of the cost associated with HVAC overhauls and upgrades and boiler systems, altogether. So those are things that I would continue to work on, but definitely bring a lot first and foremost before being able to do, like here's an example, Christmas decorations. Our town hall looks so beautiful, with all the Christmas lights on it and everything. But, while that is great and we'll continue to have these really nice, Christmas decorations that we've had the past couple of years, we can't, spend tons of money on like additional, Christmas decor and things like that. We just can't do it because at the end of the day, what's more important, the roof, the drainage, the sewage, the electrical work, or having ample, Christmas decorations at the holiday. And so it's priorities like that, which, some taxpayers may not agree. They may want to see more of other things like in those kind of areas as opposed to the maintenance work. But it's that's where I think my experience, in property management and in managing budgets and just seeing, well, this is what happens when you neglect something, when you let it go. This is how much money you have to spend. It's astronomical, especially when you're dealing with, buildings that have hundreds of square feet,
I mean, if you're going to do that, where are you going to get the money from? It means you're going to take money from somewhere. You're going to take it from the school board. You're going to take it from another board. I mean, people aren't going to be happy. Let's face it. And if you start raising taxes, you're not going to be.
No.
So, you're not gonna,
that's not the answer. Yeah.
And I think that's what happens here. A lot of people here, we see a lot of things happening here that are for good on one thing, but the roads are not being done. There's other things not being done that people are not happy with. So I'm sure you're going to have the same problem. You're not going to, people are going to, when it comes to budget stuff, and you should know this, that, well, that's going to be cut. That's going to be cut. This is going to be cut. We can't afford to do that because people want this.
Right.
Because people vote on the budget.
Right. Yeah, no, and that's a very good point is that, basically what it comes down to is that we'd have to continue to pursue grants, which is something that we've been doing. I know our town planner, Marianne Chinati, she's brought in a lot of grant money for the town. She's been working in town for the past 6 years. So between our town planner and our grant writer, Jordan, great guy, I would continue to work with them as far as looking into grants, which could help us with, again, some of this infrastructure and long-term maintenance projects on a lot of our buildings and facilities. So that would be part of it. But yeah, as far as then going back to the budget, it's true. When it comes to the budget, it would not be easy to have to figure out if it's going to come internally from in the budget. We want to make a line item that says, roof work, or in the case of ramp work, handicap access ramp work.
Sure, yeah.
I want to put, let's say, 100,000 there. Well, where's that 100,000 coming from?
Exactly.
We're going to have to cut spending, cut costs somewhere else,
And
which
you know what's going to happen there.
Mhm.
People are going to complain.
All right. Oh yeah, and that's what's hard is it's hard to set because people will complain when the services go down, meaning we don't have as many personnel able to keep up with the town demand, town services. But they'll also still complain too if there's a bucket in the middle of a room catching a drip, which I've actually seen before
Yeah.
in one of our buildings. They'll be like, "What the heck? What do I pay? What are my tax dollars going to that I have to be in a room that's catching a drip?" It's like this
Yep.
should be addressed. So it's tough to be able to satisfy on all ends. I mean, we had a Board of Finance member this past budget season that we talked about roads for a little bit, and he actually said, just address all the major concerns roads, all the ones that are in really
Sure, yeah.
poor shape. Just let's get them addressed. Let's just get it fixed. Let's figure it out in this budget. And there was a pause there from the Board of Finance members and Kevin, basically like, where in the world do you think we're going to get that much money? Because I don't think he was really putting into account. I mean, do you know how much money it takes just to do a couple miles of road?
Yeah, a few
it's
million
like-
dollars.
Yeah, it's huge. And then we think of the number of roads, the number of secondary roads that we're responsible for in Plainfield. And it's like, I was telling this Board of Finance member, like, yeah, you just can't do it, especially in 1 year. We can't just address all the poor to fair, roads. We need to continue to address them. No question. I mean, there's some areas, some access roads we have in town. They haven't been done since like the 80s, mid to late 80s. And they're really starting to show, coming apart during the plowing season. Granted, there hasn't been a lot of plowing done in the past couple of years, but still, the abuse
Yeah.
that they take because they're in such rough shape. So roads is definitely something that I would focus on, but not going to necessarily find all the money just readily available to do it,
Right,
within the
right,
tax base. So that goes back to state aid, grants, which are out there, whether it be the grant money or working also with our legislators and finding out, I mean, what could be done to help plan? Because that's another thing that's interesting is with the state, the General Assembly, like we are, of course, the forgotten corner, as we oftentimes get referenced. The quiet corner is the forgotten corner, which is true in many respects, that when a lot of the legislators are up there advocating, I mean, they're advocating for money for Bridgeport, New Haven, not Plainfield, Connecticut. And so that's something that I would work with our legislators, regardless of who's in office. I will work with them to try to see, is there something we can do here to try to get more aid for roads, more aid for buildings? Because some of our buildings, like I was telling you before, with like the Warrigan Mill, Command, the Interroyal Mill, I mean, they're brownfields, and there's state money as well as federal grant money, which we can get for it. But
Sure.
you got to have the developers ready to go. You got to have business plans ready to go, which is easier said than done. That can be a long process for trying to get those kind of commitments out
I
of
mean, are
some
these
of
the
them.
kinds of projects you go out for bonding for? I mean, would you go out?
I have a question.
Mhm.
When you go ahead.
Would you go out and do bonding for these things? I mean, if you're talking about a major overhaul to a building, that's millions of dollars.
It is.
So does that mean you would bond these kinds of projects?
Yeah.
I mean, go to a referendum, have the town figures.
Right. But here's the other thing, though, with the bonding is that we already have some things in the queue that we need to address. So meaning like you can't go out to bond for everything all simultaneously.
can't.
We gotta figure out, I mean, what would come first. So as I was mentioning before, the HVAC system, first and foremost, we got to get our HVAC systems in our school buildings up to snuff. We got to get them serviced. There's some of them are on their last leg. So we got to get that done. And it is in the queue, but that right there, is millions of dollars right there just for the HVAC boiler systems. And to
Right,
the
right.
point where, working with our superintendent and the Board of Ed, we're not going to be able to do that, of course, in one swing. It's like we might have to do like 2 or 3 buildings at first, and then down the road, see what would be the next in line, for it. So the point is that if we're working on school buildings and then we're working on some other, we also have the our Water Pollution Control Authority. We have some long-term upgrades. I mean, we're replacing generators
Right.
and pump systems right now that were like 40 years old, over 40 years old. So with doing those kind of projects, we're not going to be able to,
Exactly.
some of those
So
ones.
now if you
So-
don't do the upgrades to the school buildings for the AC, you're going to fix the road. Well, people over here want the roads. People over here want this.
Right.
You're between a rock and a hard place. You're the guy that's up there and standing in front of them. So,
All right. My question for Tom from Facebook user says, is what will your approach be to working with all the boards? As someone who frequently attends meetings, there's a real disconnect between the boards and residents currently.
Yep. So one of the things that I want to try to do is to get more interaction from the public to the boards. But I realize that we live in a time where it's going to have to be done technologically.
Common. It's a common problem.
Yeah. Oh, it is. But what I've realized is that we got to try to do it more technological. Like we live in the age of Zoom. You know, we live in the age of people like to go on and watch videos and ask questions, which I think is great. And again, that is doing thanks to June and Art Gagne, Watchdog Media, because they have been doing this now for past like 6 or so years, and a lot of people have followed what's going on in town. So still using technology such as YouTube, but also the other thing is still trying to market or promote the opportunities. It's a communication thing is what it is what can we do to send out notifications? Now, are we going to send out notifications about every single subcommittee meeting and special meeting? We will in some regards, depending on the importance of the meeting, to remind voters that there's a really important meeting going on. For example, there's our planning and zoning meetings. Our planning and zoning meetings have been getting very highly attended, not just because of the applications that are going on, but there's a couple topics there that interest a lot of people, such as the future of dispensaries, as far as what's the future there in Plainfield, and our planning and zoning commission has been deliberating, trying to figure out how would we locally regulate that and how would that go. So I would want to really push social media use, even via email, if we could look into doing an email, because some people do still use email, believe it or not.
People hide behind email too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But that's the big thing is communication to the public, because it's true. When I look at the regulars who go to the meetings, it's the same few Republicans and Democrats that go to the meeting, because again, we really care, what's going on. We're not there to get in political debates with each other. We're there because we want to know what decisions are being made and how is it affecting our tax dollars in our town. And so, but the problem is that, a lot of these average meetings, they're maybe 2, 3, I think one meeting, good if we get 5 or 6, we're doing really good, at that point, but the turnout is low. And that one is hard because some people have asked me, is there anything we could do as far as the scheduling? It's tough because, some people work multiple part-time jobs. So they don't do like the 8 to 5, business type job where, I can always make a 7 o'clock meeting. Usually I can make a 6:30 meeting. There's many residents who cannot. And one of the things we're talking about right now with our Charter Revision Commission is possibly revising our budget process, so that right now it's based on the mill rate of, if the mill rate goes up or down, that determines, are we going to have to go to a referendum or we have to go to an annual town meeting? It's one or the other based on the mill rate. Really what I personally believe, and I know I've talked to many other residents who believe we need to go this, is that like the town meeting is just, it'll get, maybe 2, 3, possibly if we're lucky, over 400 people, depending on the debates of it. But the point is that's still 400 people, let's just say, is still a small portion of our 15,000 residents that live in Plainfield. So the thought is that instead of this 7 o'clock town meeting, which we a lot of times have to go to, what if it was referendum where, based on your personal schedule, you can try to make it in the morning, afternoon, or evening and vote on this annual budget? The idea would be, the hope would be, is that we could get more turnout. We could get more public participation for the voting process, because many have said that they haven't voted on a town budget in years because they can never make that 7 o'clock town meeting. So I definitely want to focus on the communication to the public and saying, what can we do to try to get you more involved with the boards and commissions? Because there is a disconnect. And one of the things I try to help residents out with all the time is when I talk to them about something that's going on in town, they'll be like, well, I'm going to go to the Board of Selectmen about this, or I'm going to contact the Selectmen's office. But sometimes it's an education related question, or it's a budget question, a finance question, which would go to the finance department or the Board of Finance. So I try to put them in line, because I don't want them to have to go through the trouble of going to a meeting just to be told, sorry, we don't answer that question. That's a different board or commission. It's like, well, that's frustrating, knowing that they took the time to make it out to the meeting just to be, so I try to send them in the right direction as best I can. But I think that's what we got to try to do is, make people understand there's certain decisions that fall under the discretion of the Board of Ed, Board of Finance, or Board of Selectmen. And you definitely want to go to your elected officials. You want to go and, make sure that they're doing what they were elected to do.
Yeah, that's not an uncommon issue. It's that same issue.
We're about ready to end. Paul comes alive. Good, Paul. I'm saying.
That's a common issue across multiple small towns. Just the way it is. People just don't have time to.
Yeah.
Well, they use the excuse. I didn't know about that. I mean, we hear that all the time.
Well, we don't live in a 9-to-5 society anymore.
So
We
Right.
really
the
don't.
communication thing is, if you can come up with a real good way to figure that one out,
Mhm.
I'm sure a lot of people would jump on board, not only in your town, but
Yeah.
other towns.
I mean, I know that one thing that a lot of people commented on is we have the libertarian in our town, Matt Radin. He's actually chair right now of the Charter Revision Commission. But Matt's a great guy. He like me, he's one of those few that will pretty much regularly attend Board of Selectmen,
You
Board
know,
of
you
Finance
scared me a
meetings.
little bit. I thought you were going to say Dan.
Yeah, no, he
The
yeah,
real deal, Dan Real.
yeah, no longer a resident of Plainfield.
No, he's here.
Yeah,
He's here doing his thing. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, but Matt is a great guy because I'm always talking to him about what's going on and getting his input. Because I mean, you know, he a lot of times is talking about how there's not a Republican or a Democrat approach to it. It's like we need to approach this
Right.
from, again, what's the best for the residents. Which I mean, that's really what I want to try to, you know, have more people think of in the mindset of what's best for us as a town, you know, as a residents, not what's best for one party or the other. But Matt, I love when I talk to him and he would say like, you know, oh, I probably should put on a reminder. So what he would do is he would go onto one of our active town resident pages and he would put like, hey, just to let you know, there's a public hearing tonight for the Charter Revision Commission and so many people would like it, share it. And it's like, it didn't take much for him to just put a couple, you know, words there and a
Right.
reminder, but that just posting on a local residence page goes a long way as far as like a reminder, like I want to try to make it to that. Cause I got, you know, some things I want to ask them, you know.
So there is one question that I have left for you for today.
Mhm.
And it's very, very simple. It does put you on the spot. It's a yes or no question.
Mhm.
And I have not asked your opponent this yet.
Mhm.
So will you be open to a debate against Mr. Cunningham right here?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
There we go. So there we go. So because we have a debate. Well, we have a debate tomorrow night.
I do.
Yeah, there's a Republican primary.
Okay. Yeah.
Between the two candidates, the endorsed candidate and the incumbent.
Mhm.
So we have that tomorrow. But it's debate season, and
Yep.
that's the way that it is.
That's right.
All right, Tom. We thank you for coming on
Yeah.
in. Is there anything else that you wanted to go ahead and say that that because we kind of go back and forth
Mm-hmm.
but is there anything else that you want to go ahead and say? I mean, take 2 minutes and look at the camera and tell the town of Plainfield why you deserve their vote.
I thank you for the opportunity, obviously, in coming on here. I know that there's some Plainfield residents who regularly are monitoring, you know, your discussions, your show here, what's going on, which I think is great. Just like we got ones who regular monitor WYMY, and it's
Who
like
are
because
they?
yeah,
Are they still in
they're
business?
still in business.
No, that's a joke. Sorry,
Yeah,
Gary.
yeah.
Gary, really,
Yeah,
no.
yeah.
It's a
But
joke.
but it's just the point is that it's an avenue. It's one way that, you know, we discuss what's going on in local communities. So I appreciate, you know, the time to be able to come on here and talk about some of the points that are near and dear to me that I want to try to put out there to the public. And obviously, you know, get their vote if I can, but understandably so. I mean, you know, not going to persuade everybody, not going to, you know, satisfy everybody. Some will be fine, you know, with the way things are, and that's okay. But you know, the big thing is I want people to get out and vote because unfortunately, and I know this is the case for a lot of towns, a municipal election year and municipal turnout for elections tends to be very low. So I'm hoping
Yeah.
that it can be decent.
We know,
you know.
that. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the big thing is I'm getting out to people, not just presenting myself, you know, as far as what do I represent, what do I want to try to accomplish, but also just get out and vote on election day. I mean, that's the big thing. Even though it's a municipal election, it's still important because it directly
Of course it is.
impacts you. It's just some people are just like, oh, I don't vote
I
in
think it's
those.
more
you know.
important. I think it's more
Oh,
important.
yeah.
You know,
I think it is too.
Yeah.
You know, this is local. I mean, we can, you know, the romantic, sexy part of like a national election, you know, will bring people out.
Mm.
But what's really going to affect you and me and Paul and every other resident in Jewett City, Griswold, Plainfield, Warregan, wherever you may be, is what happens in your own backyard.
Yeah.
Right. So all those people that are saying, not in my backyard, you know, y'all
Yeah.
can suck it.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Yeah.
so it is in our backyard.
It is.
And that's where we have to really kind of mow our own backyard.
Yep.
And that's why I think these are much more important.
Correct.
So,
Thank you, Tom.
thanks.
I appreciate you coming on in. Paul, thanks for being the eye candy that you are.
I would have talked more, but unfortunately, I couldn't get a word in it.
What you talking about? He didn't shut up. You talking about? No, it's good. We'll do it again.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Tomorrow night, don't forget, we have our first debate of the year where it's going to be who's it going to be? I don't even know. Dana Bennett and Mr. Wayne Malin, who is the endorsed candidate, and of course Dana Bennett is the incumbent. So that is tomorrow night. It's going to be 7 p.m. So we'll still have a show in the morning. Janice Steinhagen is going to be the moderator for that event. I'd like to get Janice in tomorrow morning, and talk to her and do a little pre-debate, little hustle here, see what we can find. So, all right, have a good day, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Right.